At a Christmas Eve family dinner, my son-in-law's father mocked my 40 years as an electrician, while my wife stayed silent and my daughter looked away. When I finally defended myself, my son-in-law coldly said, "If you don't like my father's jokes, pay the bill and leave." I didn't argue. I smiled, paid the entire check, and walked out alone. But they never knew the quiet decision I made afterward would change everything they thought about me. Welcome to Dad's Revenge Stories. I'm so grateful you're here. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Also, please note, this story includes fictional elements crafted for entertainment and valuable lessons. Any resemblance to names or places is purely coincidental, but the core message remains deeply meaningful. My name is William Carter. I am 68 years old, a retired electrician with 40 years of calluses on my hands, and not a single regret about how I earned them. I worked hard. I raised my daughter right, or at least I thought I did. And on the evening of December 24th, 2023, I walked into a seafood restaurant downtown, wearing my good coat, expecting a warm Christmas dinner with my family. I should have known better. The restaurant was the kind of place that put little sprigs of rosemary on the bread plates and charged $18 for a glass of wine. Dorothy had texted me the address 3 days earlier with a note that said, "Emily picked it. Dress nice." I pressed my gray slacks, wore the navy coat I kept for church and funerals, and drove 40 minutes through light Christmas Eve traffic to get there. When I pushed open the heavy glass door and felt the warm air hit my face, I spotted them immediately. Emily was already seated in a curved corner booth near the window, her dark hair pinned up the way she wore it when she wanted to look impressive. Dorothy sat beside her, a glass of white wine in front of her, already half empty. And across the table, leaning back against the cushioned seat like he owned the place, was my son-in-law, Derek Walsh, a man I had known for 11 years and trusted for far fewer. Beside Derek sat his father, Frank Walsh. I had met Frank maybe a dozen times over the years. He was a heavy-set man in his late 60s who wore sport coats with pocket squares and had a habit of laughing too loudly at his own jokes. He sold commercial real estate for 30 years before retiring to a condo in Scottsdale, and he never let anyone in a 5-mile radius forget it. The moment I stepped through the door, Frank's eyes landed on me and stayed there a half-second too long. Derek noticed me next. He straightened up in his seat, tilted his chin, and let a slow smile spread across his face. Not the smile a man gives his father-in-law on Christmas Eve. The other kind, Dad, he said loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. "Glad you made it." He paused, letting his eyes travel down from my face to my coat and back up again, slow and deliberate. "I have to say, though, I thought you might dress up a little more for the occasion. This is a Christmas dinner, not a service call." Frank laughed. It came out sharp and fast, like he had been waiting for it. Emily pressed her lips together and looked at her wine glass. Dorothy's hand tightened around the stem of hers, but she did not look up at me. I felt the words land. I felt them the way you feel a door close in a quiet house, not loud, but absolute. I had driven 40 minutes. I had pressed my slacks. I was wearing the coat I wore to my brother's funeral 8 years ago because I thought it was my best one. But I did not flinch. I pulled out the chair across from Frank, settled into it, and picked up the menu. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said. My voice came out even. I was proud of that. "William." Dorothy finally looked at me. Her eyes were doing that thing they did when she wanted me to read her mind, wide and slightly urgent, like she was sending me a signal I was supposed to already understand. I gave her a small nod and turned back to the menu. The appetizers were listed in a font so small I had to hold the menu at arm's length. Frank watched me do it. "Getting harder to read the fine print, huh, Bill?" He chuckled and reached for his water glass. "That's retirement for you." Nothing but time and bad eyes. I keep busy, I said without looking up. Oh, I'm sure. Frank waved a hand. Little projects around the house, I'd imagine. That's what you fellows do, right? Keep the hands moving. I set the menu down. I looked at Frank Walsh directly and gave him the same expression I gave every homeowner who underestimated how long a panel upgrade was going to take. Patient. Unreadable. Waiting. Frank held my gaze for about 3 seconds before he reached for the bread basket. The waiter came and took our drink orders. I asked for black coffee. Derek ordered a bottle of something I couldn't pronounce and didn't recognize, and when it arrived, he made a small production of swirling it and nodding approval like he was on a television program. Frank got the same. Emily ordered a second glass of whatever she already had. Dorothy covered her glass with her hand and shook her head, which I thought was strange because Dorothy loved wine. I noticed things like that. 40 years of electrical work teaches you to notice things that don't fit the circuit. Dinner conversation moved in the way it always did when Derek was in charge of the table, meaning it moved wherever Derek pointed it. He talked about a property deal he was working on in the new year, something about a mixed-use development near the waterfront. Frank asked questions that weren't really questions, but statements of agreement dressed up in rising intonation. Emily smiled and nodded. Dorothy stirred her water with a little straw and did not say much. I ate my bread. I listened. Then Frank set down his fork, cleared his throat, and looked at me with the expression of a man who had been waiting to say something for the better part of an hour. You know, William, I have to hand it to you, he began. 40 years in the trades. That's a real commitment. The word commitment came out the way some people said the word interesting, meaning the opposite. Not everyone has the stomach for that kind of work. All those years crawling around in attics, junction boxes, all that. He shook his head slowly. I could never do it. Most people couldn't, I said. Frank blinked. That was not the response he expected. Derek jumped in smoothly the way he always did when a conversation needed steering. What Dad means is it takes a certain kind of person. Very dedicated. He lifted his wine glass and let the pause do its work. But honestly, Dad, don't you think it's nice to finally be done with all that? No more crawling through people's walls. No more getting called out on Christmas Eve for somebody's blown fuse. He smiled. You can just relax now. Let the rest of us handle things. I looked at my son-in-law across the candlelit table. He was 41 years old, broad-shouldered, wearing a jacket that cost more than my first car. His hair was perfect. His teeth were perfect. He had the easy confidence of a man who had never once worried about whether the lights would stay on. I don't need anyone to handle things for me, Derek, I said. Thank you. Emily made a small sound in her throat. Dad, he's just saying you deserve to rest. Don't take it the wrong way. I didn't take it anyway, I said. I answered the question. Dorothy put her hand on my forearm. William, she said softly. One word. The same word she had used for 43 years whenever she needed me to stand down. The food arrived. Salmon for Frank and Derek, lobster bisque for Emily, and a simple grilled halibut for me. Dorothy had ordered the same. We ate. The restaurant hummed around us with the low murmur of other families and the soft sound of a jazz quartet playing somewhere near the bar. For a few minutes, it was almost pleasant. Then Derek set his fork down, reached for his wine glass, and looked at me from across the table with an expression I had not seen directed at me before. Calm. Deliberate. Like a man who had already decided what he was about to say. Can I ask you something, Dad? He did not wait for me to answer. Does it ever bother you showing up to a place like this in He tilted his head slightly. That coat. The table went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people eating. The other kind. Frank lifted his wineglass to his lips and said nothing, but his eyes were bright with attention. Emily tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and stared at the tablecloth. Dorothy's hand, which had been resting near her wineglass, went completely still. I looked down at my coat. The navy wool one I had owned for 18 years. The one I had dry cleaned twice and kept in a garment bag. The one I wore to my brother's funeral and to Emily's college graduation and to the courthouse the day she and Derek signed their marriage certificate. I looked back up at Derek Walsh. "No," I said. "It doesn't bother me at all." Derek smiled, thin and satisfied like a man who had just made his point without having to make it out loud. I picked up my coffee cup. My hand was steady. I was grateful for that. I brought the cup to my lips and took a long, slow sip while the jazz quartet started in on something quiet and unhurried from across the room. I set the cup down, and I began to think. Frank Walsh refilled his wineglass without being asked and leaned back in his seat with the comfort of a man who had never once eaten at a table he could not afford. He studied me the way people study something they have already made up their minds about, not curious, just confirming. "You know what I always say." Frank began addressing the table rather than any one person. "A man who works with his hands his whole life deserves credit. Real credit." He paused to let that land before he kept going. "But there comes a point where you have to ask yourself, is that all there is? 40 years pulling wire through somebody else's walls, and then what? A pension and a vegetable garden." Derek smiled into his wineglass. "I kept busy," I said. "I still do." "Oh, I know." Frank waved the objection away like cigarette smoke. "But be honest with us, William. When Derek told me you retired, I thought finally the man can breathe. Get out of those crawl spaces. Stop smelling like copper and insulation." He chuckled at his own image. "A man your age should be traveling, seeing things, not puttering around with junction boxes." Dorothy set her fork down. I heard the small click of it against the china plate, and I knew without looking that her jaw had tightened. "William has done very well for himself," she said. Her voice was careful and measured the way it got when she was angry, but had decided not to be angry out loud. Frank held up both hands in mock surrender. "Of course he has, Dorothy. I'm not saying otherwise. All I'm saying is—" He glanced at Derek with the quick, sideways look of two people sharing a joke without speaking it. "There's a ceiling to that kind of work. You hit it, and then you're done. It's not like real estate where the sky is the limit." "The sky has limits too," I said. "Depending on the weather." Frank stared at me for a moment. Then he laughed genuinely, this time surprised out of it. "Huh, fair enough, Bill. Fair enough." But Derek was not laughing. He was watching me with the particular attention of a man who had just recalculated something. He cut a piece of his salmon and chewed it slowly. "The thing is, Dad," he said, and he called me Dad. The way some people use a title they do not mean as punctuation rather than affection. What Frank is getting at is legacy, what you leave behind. He gestured loosely with his fork. "In my business, you build something, a portfolio, a reputation. People know your name in 10 years, 20 years. They call you." He set the fork down. "What does an electrician leave behind?" The table was quiet. Emily reached for her wine. I looked at my son-in-law for a long moment. I thought about the Hendersons on Maple Drive whose panel I upgraded in 2003. I thought about the community center on 5th Street, where I rewired the entire East Wing over one long summer, so their after-school program could run 3 more classrooms. I thought about the 47 apprentices I trained over my career, 6 of whom now ran their own companies. I thought about the hospital wing on the north side of town, where the backup generator system I installed had held without a single failure for 19 years. Safe houses, I said. I leave behind safe houses and the people who sleep in them. Emily made a small sound that was almost a laugh, and then quickly covered it by drinking from her glass. Frank tilted his head and conceded a nod, though his eyes did not agree with his chin. Derek, however, let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds before he turned to Frank and said, "Dad, how's the Scottsdale place holding up? You mentioned the back patio." And just like that, the conversation moved on the way it always did when Derek decided something was finished. As if my answer had been acknowledged and filed away in a drawer marked "not relevant," and the drawer had been quietly shut, Dorothy looked at me across the table. Her eyes held something I had not seen in them in a long time, something between sorrow and fury pressed down thin and smooth so it would not show. She reached for her water glass instead of her wine, and I understood that she had not been drinking tonight because she wanted to stay sharp. She was watching. She had been watching the whole time. That should have made me feel less alone. It did not. Frank launched into a story about a golf trip he was planning in the spring. Emily asked questions about the resort with genuine enthusiasm, and Derek nodded along, and for a stretch of several minutes I was as invisible at that table as the candle holders between the flower arrangements. I ate my halibut. It was good fish. I focused on that. Then Frank set down his wine glass with a deliberateness that cut through the table noise and looked at me with an expression that had finished pretending to be friendly. "William," he said, "can I ask you something directly?" "Go ahead," I said. Do you ever feel like—" He paused, choosing the words, the way a man chooses a club on a fairway. "You've been left behind, not in a bad way. Just honestly. The world moves fast. Some people keep up, and some people find their lane and stay in it." He spread his hands flat on the tablecloth. "There's no shame in the second one. But I always wonder, for a man in your position, does it sting a little watching Derek build something real while you're a small shrug, where you are?" My daughter pressed her fingertips hard against the stem of her wineglass until I saw the color leave her knuckles. She did not say a word. I picked up my coffee cup, brought it to my lips, set it down again. "Frank," I said quietly, "I spent 40 years making sure that when people flipped a switch, the lights came on. Every single time." I folded my hands on the table. "I'm still the same man. The switch hasn't changed." Frank opened his mouth. Derek cut in first. "Nobody's questioning that, Dad." His voice had dropped half a register lower, smoother, carrying an edge that the surface of it was designed to hide. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. "We're all just saying a man like you at this stage of life sitting here." His eyes moved across me once, briefly taking inventory. "Maybe it's time to accept where things stand. You've had your run. That's something to be proud of." The corner of his mouth lifted. "But some of us are still running." The jazz quartet started a new song near the bar, something slow and low and relentless. I looked at Derek Walsh across the candlelight. I looked at my daughter, who was studying the tablecloth, as though it contained a map she was trying to memorize. I looked at Dorothy, whose hand had moved to her lap, out of sight, where I knew she was pressing her thumbnail hard into her palm, a habit she had when she was holding something in. Then I picked up my menu and looked at the dessert options. "I think I'll have the apple tart," I said. The apple tart arrived in a small white dish with a scoop of vanilla bean ice cream on the side. I ate it slowly. It was good buttery crust cinnamon underneath, the kind of thing someone's grandmother spent years perfecting. before a restaurant chef put it on a $12 menu. I focused on it the way I used to focus on a complicated wiring diagram, one section at a time. Don't rush the work. Frank had moved on to telling a story about a real estate deal in Phoenix that had gone sideways 3 years ago. A story I suspected he told often because he had the pacing of it down cold. Derek listened and added details at the right moments, the way a practiced audience member does. Emily laughed at the correct intervals. Dorothy drank her water. I finished my tart. I set the spoon down. I folded my hands on the table. That was when Derek put his wine glass down, with a sound that was just slightly too deliberate, not a slam, but not gentle either. The kind of sound a man makes when he wants the table's attention, without asking for it directly. Frank stopped mid-sentence. Emily looked up. Dorothy's eyes cut sideways to me for just a fraction of a second. Derek leaned forward, both elbows on the table. He looked at me the way he looked at a property he was about to lowball, measuring, calculating, already certain of the outcome. "Can I say something?" he asked. He did not wait for anyone to say yes. "I've been sitting here all night thinking about how to put this, and I've decided I'm just going to say it." His voice was calm and unhurried, which was worse than if he had been angry. "William, you are a good man. I mean that. You worked hard. You provided. All of that." A pause precisely timed. "But this—" He gestured slowly around the table, taking in the restaurant, the other diners, the wine, the candlelight. "This is not your world. And I think somewhere inside you know that." My chest tightened. Not from anger, from recognition. "Derek." Dorothy's voice carried a warning in it, like a current running under still water. He held up one hand without looking at her. "No, Dorothy, I think this needs to be said, because we keep dancing around it." He turned back to me. "Dad, with respect, a man who spent his life in other people's attics, a man who smells like solder and circuit breakers, a man who shows up to a dinner like this in a coat he bought before his daughter finished high school." His voice did not rise, not even slightly. "That man does not belong at this table." He lowers the whole thing. "And everyone sitting here knows it, even if nobody will say it." Frank looked at the tablecloth. Even he had the decency to look at the tablecloth. Emily's face had gone the color of old chalk. Her mouth opened and then closed without producing a sound, like a word that had started and then thought better of itself. Dorothy pushed back from the table an inch. Her chair scraped against the floor. "Derek, that is enough." "I'm not being cruel," Derek said evenly. "I'm being honest. There's a difference." He picked up his wine glass again, smooth and unhurried, and took a slow sip. "If you don't feel comfortable here, Dad, no one is keeping you. That's all I'm saying." The jazz quartet had stopped playing. Or maybe they hadn't, and I simply could not hear them anymore over the particular kind of silence that had settled over our corner of the restaurant. The couple at the table nearest us had gone very still, in the way that people go still when they are trying hard not to appear to be listening. I sat with Derek's words for a moment, the way you sit with a diagnosis, not rushing to respond, not running from it, just letting it be exactly what it was. Then I unfolded my hands. I placed them flat on the tablecloth. I looked at my son-in-law without blinking, without raising my voice, without giving him the satisfaction of watching me flinch. "You know, Derek," I said, "in 40 years of electrical work, I dealt with a lot of faulty wiring, connections that looked solid on the outside but were corroded all the way through. Dangerous not because they were loud about it, but because they weren't." I kept my voice level and unhurried. "You learn to spot them. After a while it gets easy." Derek's jaw tightened just slightly, just once. I reached for my jacket on the back of my chair. I lifted it and set it across my lap. Then I turned to Dorothy, who was gripping the edge of the table with both hands, her knuckles sharp and white against the linen. "Are you ready to go home?" I asked her. Dorothy looked at me. Then she looked at Emily. Something passed between them, some negotiation conducted entirely in the space of 2 seconds, and when Dorothy turned back to me, her eyes were wet at the corners, and her chin had dropped half an inch. "Give me a few more minutes," she whispered. "Please." I looked at my daughter. Emily was staring at the centerpiece, a small pine arrangement, with a red ribbon with the focused intensity of someone who could not afford to look at anything else in the room. I put my jacket on, one arm then the other. I smoothed the lapels with both hands, the navy wool one, the one Derek had made his point about 2 hours ago. I raised my hand and caught the eye of our waiter across the room. The waiter appeared at my elbow. Within 30 seconds, a young man, early 20s, with the careful posture of someone working a holiday shift and trying hard to make it count. "Can I get something for you, sir?" he asked. "The check," I said. "The whole table." He glanced across the faces at the booth. Derek's wine glass halfway to his mouth. Frank's fork suspended over his plate. Emily's hand frozen around her napkin, and then looked back at me with the practiced neutrality of someone who had learned not to read the room out loud. "Of course," he said. "I'll be right back." Derek set his wine glass down. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Paying the bill," I said. "Like you suggested." His eyes narrowed by a fraction. "I didn't suggest anything. You said if I wasn't comfortable, I was free to go." I straightened the cuffs of my jacket. "I'm taking you up on it." Frank cleared his throat and reached for his water glass. Emily pressed 3 fingers flat against her lips. Dorothy looked at me with an expression I had not seen her wear in years, something raw and unfinished, like a sentence that had stopped before the period. The waiter returned with the check presenter and set it at my elbow. I opened it. The total was $342 before tip. I did the math in my head, added 20%, because the young man had done his job well, and that had nothing to do with what was happening at the table. And I put my card in the sleeve and handed it back. "Sir, this covers everyone," the waiter confirmed quietly. "Everyone," I said. Derek's chair scraped back an inch. "William, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," I said. "I want to. Merry Christmas." The waiter disappeared. The table held its breath. Frank picked up his fork and set it back down again without eating anything. Emily was looking at me now, really looking the way she hadn't since I walked through the door, and there was something working behind her eyes that I couldn't fully read. Guilt, maybe. Or the beginning of it. The kind that arrives too late to do much good. Dorothy reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her fingers were cold from holding her water glass all evening. "Come home with me," she said softly. "We'll talk in the car." I turned my hand over and held hers for a moment. I felt the thin gold of her wedding ring against my palm, worn smooth from 43 years of daily contact. I thought about the kitchen table at home, the one we had bought at an estate sale the year Emily started kindergarten. I thought about Christmas mornings in that kitchen, the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls, Emily in her pajamas, with her hair going every direction. "Are you coming?" I asked her. Dorothy looked at Emily. That sideways look again, the one that had been passing between them all evening like a private signal I had never been given the frequency for. Emily gave the smallest nod. Not to me. To her mother. Dorothy pulled her hand back slowly. "I'll get a ride in a little while," she said. "I just want to finish my coffee. Don't make a scene, William." "Not tonight." The waiter returned with my card and the receipt. I signed it, added the tip in careful numbers, and tucked the card back into my wallet. $411. I noted the figure the way I noted everything, quietly, precisely, without editorial. I pushed back from the table and stood. All 5 feet 11 inches of me in the navy wool coat Derek had introduced to the table 3 hours ago, like evidence at a trial. Frank looked somewhere past my left shoulder. Derek looked directly at me with an expression that had rearranged itself into something resembling patience, as though he were waiting for a mildly inconvenient weather system to pass. "Good night," I said to the table. "Dad." Emily's voice came out smaller than I expected, younger somehow, like a word that had gotten lost on its way from one decade to another. "Drive safe." I looked at my daughter. At the careful way she was holding herself together in that booth, shoulders straight, chin level, everything tucked in tight, so nothing could spill. I had watched her learn to do that. I had watched her practice it at the kitchen table, at school recitals, at every hard thing she had ever faced in her life. I had been proud of her for it once. "Always do," I said. I walked the length of the restaurant without hurrying. Past the jazz quartet, who had started up again on something gentle and low. Past the other tables with their candles and their Christmas crackers and their ordinary holiday arguments about nothing that mattered. Through the heavy glass door and out into the December night. The cold hit me clean and sharp across the face. The parking lot was quiet. Overhead, the sky was the deep, flat black of a night with no moon, and the air smelled like exhaust and pine from the wreath someone had hung on the restaurant's exterior wall. I found my truck. I unlocked it, got in, and sat for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel without starting the engine. The leather was cold through my palms. Through the restaurant window, I could see the booth, Frank gesturing, Derek leaning back, Emily very still, Dorothy looking down at something on the table in front of her. I started the engine. I turned on the heat. I pulled out of the parking space and pointed the truck toward home. I did not look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there I needed to see. But somewhere on the drive home, between the second traffic light and the bridge over Miller Creek, something settled in my chest that had not been settled in a very long time. Not peace exactly. Something firmer than that. A decision. Christmas morning came in through the east window, the way it always did, slow and gray and indifferent to whatever had happened the night before. I was already on the porch when the light arrived. I had been up since 5:30, which was not unusual. 40 years of early job sites had wired my body clock the same way I wired everything else, precise, reliable, not easily changed. I had made a full pot of coffee. I had scrambled 2 eggs and eaten them at the kitchen table with the radio on low, a country station out of the city that played gospel music on Sunday mornings and Christmas Day. I had washed my plate and my fork and set them in the drying rack. Then I had put on my coat, the navy one, poured a second cup, and come outside to sit in the old wooden chair on the porch and watch the neighborhood come to life. The street was quiet, the way only Christmas morning can make a street quiet. The Pattersons across the road had left their porch light on all night, a string of white bulbs along the roofline that blinked in a slow, irregular pattern that told me one of the connectors in the Strand was going. I had noticed it 3 weeks ago. A 10-minute fix if Gary Patterson ever asked. He hadn't. I drank my coffee. I breathed the cold air. I did not think about the restaurant. I thought about the restaurant anyway. Not about Derek's words specifically. I had heard variations of those words before from foremen who thought trade workers were interchangeable parts, from homeowners who called me by my first name, but would not offer me a glass of water on a July afternoon. Words like that had a familiar shape. They did not surprise me. What surprised me was the source. What surprised me was Emily pressing 3 fingers to her lips and saying nothing. What surprised me was Dorothy pulling her hand back and looking at her coffee cup while I put on my coat. I had been married to that woman for 43 years. I knew every version of her silence. Last night's was a new one. I was on my 3rd cup when I heard the side gate open Ray Donahue came around the corner of the house with a foil-wrapped plate in both hands, and the careful walk of a man carrying something he did not want to drop. He was 69 years old, built like a man who had spent his career doing physical work because he had 32 years as a lineman for the County Electric Authority before his knees made the decision for him. We had known each other since our daughters were in the same third-grade class. That was 30 years ago. Emily and their daughter Patrice had long since drifted to different cities and different lives, but Ray and I had stayed. Maggie made cornbread, he announced, setting the plate on the porch railing. She made 3 batches because she said the first 2 weren't right, and now we have enough cornbread to last until February. He pulled the second chair over from the corner, the one Dorothy usually sat in, and lowered himself into it with the particular grunt of a man whose knees had opinions. "Merry Christmas, Bill." "Merry Christmas, Ray." He looked at me for a moment, with the direct, unhurried assessment of a man who had known me long enough to skip the preliminary questions. "Maggie heard Dorothy's car pull in around midnight," he said. "Said yours came in before 10. "That's right," I said. Ray nodded. He reached over and took a piece of cornbread from the plate and ate it without ceremony. He chewed. He looked at the street. He waited. That was the thing about Ray Donahue. He had an extraordinary capacity for waiting. I had watched him sit in a deer blind for 6 hours without moving. He could outlast a silence the way other men outlasted bad weather, not fighting it, just letting it run its course. "Derek said I lower the whole table," I said. His exact words. Ray stopped chewing. He looked at me. Frank Walsh spent the better part of an hour explaining to me that electricians don't leave anything behind worth mentioning. I drank my coffee. Emily didn't say a word. Dorothy asked me not to make a scene and stayed for her coffee. Ray set his piece of cornbread down on the railing. He was quiet for a moment, not the blank quiet of someone who had nothing to say, but the full quiet of someone choosing carefully among several things. "So you paid, didn't you?" he said. It was not a question. "Whole table," like I said. $411. Ray let out a long breath through his nose. He picked his cornbread back up. "Bill," he said, "in 30 years, I have watched you show up to every hard thing with your tools in your hand and your mouth shut. I have watched you fix things that other men walked away from. I have watched you give your time and your skill and your money to people who did not always deserve it." He paused. "What happened last night was not a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of theirs." My throat tightened in a way I had not expected. I took a sip of coffee to cover it. "The worst part," I said, "is that I keep financing it. The insurance, the phones, the maintenance on their house." I looked out at the blinking porch light across the street. "I've been subsidizing the people who just told me I don't belong at their table." Ray turned and looked at me with an expression I recognized. It was the same expression he wore when a job had been misdiagnosed and needed to be completely rewired from the panel out. "Well," he said quietly. "Are you going to keep doing that?" My phone buzzed on the arm of the chair. The screen lit up with Emily's name. We both looked at it. I reached over, turned it face down on the armrest, and picked up my coffee cup. "No," I said. "I don't think I am. The day after Christmas has its own particular feeling, like the morning after a storm when the damage is visible but the wind has stopped." I spent the morning in the garage reorganizing my tool cabinets. It was something I did when I needed to think without appearing to think. Every socket wrench in its place, every drill bit sorted by diameter, every spool of wire labeled and hung. Order where I could make it. Dorothy had come home around 1 in the morning. I had heard her key in the lock, heard her move through the kitchen, heard the bedroom door close with the careful quiet of someone who did not want to have a conversation. I had been awake. I stayed on my side of the bed and listened to her breathing slow into sleep, and I thought about 43 years of that sound and what it was worth and what it was costing me. I was back in the garage by 7. By early afternoon, I had worked through the tool cabinets and moved on to replacing a worn washer in the utility sink. I was under the cabinet with a wrench when I heard the side gate again. Different footsteps this time, lighter, quicker, with the purposeful energy of someone who had already decided what she was going to do before she left her own house. Maggie Donahue came around the corner carrying a covered pot with both hands and wearing her winter coat over what looked like her gardening clothes. She was 67 years old, a retired school librarian with silver hair cut practical and short, and the cheerful, no-nonsense manner of a woman who had spent 30 years managing both a library and Ray Donahue. She and Dorothy had been close for years, book club neighborhood association, the kind of friendship built out of proximity and consistency until it became something real. "Ray told me," she said by way of greeting. She held up the pot. "Chicken soup. Don't argue." "I wasn't going to," I said. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and held the door open for her. She came into the kitchen and set the pot on the stove with the familiarity of someone who had been in this kitchen many times before. She lifted the lid, checked the contents, replaced the lid, and turned the burner to low. Then she turned around and looked at me with the direct, clear-eyed assessment that had probably served her well with both difficult library patrons and her husband. "You look fine," she announced. "I am fine," I said. "Good." She pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down. "Ray said you're going to stop paying their bills." "That's the plan." "Good," she said again, with the same tone she might use to approve a well-sourced bibliography. We sat together at the kitchen table for a while. Maggie told me about her sister's family in Dayton who had driven through an ice storm to make Christmas dinner and arrived 2 hours late with a frozen pie. I told her about the connectors issue in Gary Patterson's porch lights. Outside the kitchen window, the December afternoon light was going flat and gray, the way it did around 3 o'clock this time of year. I was refilling Maggie's coffee when the gate opened a third time. A neighbor I recognized from 2 houses down, a man named Pete Garland, mid-50s, who coached youth soccer and took too many photographs of neighborhood events for the community Facebook group, walked past the kitchen window with his phone raised. He paused for a moment at the sight of Maggie and me through the glass, smiled, and kept walking. I did not think anything of it. 40 minutes later, my phone rang. "Emily," I answered it this time. "Dad." Her voice was tight and quick the way it got when she was managing something she considered a problem. "I need you to understand something. Derek's clients, a lot of them are in the Cloverdale neighborhood group. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "Say it plainly, Emily." Pete Garland just posted a photo of you and Maggie Donahue on the porch to the community page." Her voice climbed half a register. "The caption says something about neighbors looking out for each other at the holidays. It's sweet, Dad, I get it, but Derek's colleague already commented on it, and now people are going to start asking questions about why you're sitting on your porch alone on December 26th with the neighbor's wife instead of with your family." I looked at Maggie across the table. She had heard enough of it to raise one eyebrow. "Emily," I said, "a neighbor brought me soup. That is the complete story." "I know that, but it doesn't look—" "It looks like a neighbor brought me soup," I said, "because that is what happened. Can you just ask Pete to take it down, or at least Dad think about how this reflects on us? Derek works with these people." I set my coffee cup down on the table. Something had shifted in me, small but definite, like a load-bearing connection finally giving way after months of stress. "Emily," I said, Last night your husband told a full restaurant that I lower the quality of any table I sit at. Tonight you are calling me because you are worried about how a photograph of a bowl of soup affects Derek's professional image. I paused. Do you hear what you're saying to me? The line was quiet for 3 full seconds. Dad, I didn't mean... I know what you meant, I said. I'll talk to you later, Emily. I ended the call. I set the phone face down on the table. Maggie was watching me with her hands wrapped around her coffee mug and an expression that was not quite sympathy and not quite satisfaction, but somewhere between the two that only a person who has known you a long time can manage. She called about the photo, Maggie said. She called about Derek's clients, I said. Maggie nodded slowly. She reached over and lifted the lid on the soup pot to check the temperature. The smell of chicken and thyme and celery moved through the kitchen, warm and ordinary, and entirely on my side. William, she said, replacing the lid. I have known your daughter since she was 8 years old. She looked at me directly. She knows exactly what she's doing. She just hasn't decided yet whether she's sorry about it. I picked up my coffee. Outside, the last of the December light was giving up entirely, and the street lamps were coming on one by one down the block, each one steady and reliable, and doing precisely what it was built to do. 2 days after Christmas, Dorothy drove to Emily's house with an overnight bag and a casserole dish wrapped in foil. She told me she was going to help Emily with some things around the house, and that she would be back in a few days. She said it the way people say things they have rehearsed evenly, without looking directly at my face with the particular care of someone who knows. The words are not the whole truth, but has decided the whole truth is too complicated for a Thursday morning. I carried her bag to the car. I said, "Drive safe." I watched her back out of the driveway. Then I went inside, poured a cup of coffee, and sat down at the desk in my study. The room was small and practical, bookshelves along one wall, a filing cabinet in the corner, the old wooden desk I had bought second-hand 20 years ago, and refinished myself over one long weekend. On top of it sat my laptop, a legal pad, a cup of pens, and the small leather notebook I used to track household expenses. I opened the notebook first. I had kept detailed records for years. Every recurring expense, every automatic payment, every account that had my name on it, and someone else's convenience attached to it. I found the page I was looking for and read down the list with the same attention. I gave to a wiring schematic, methodical, no skipping, no assumptions. Derek and Emily's vehicles were on my auto insurance policy. I had added Derek's truck 11 years ago when they first married because he was between jobs and the premium would have been punishing on his own. I had added Emily's sedan 3 years later when her lease ended and she bought outright. Together, the two vehicles added $420 to my monthly premium. I was the named insured. The policy was mine. I opened my laptop and navigated to my insurance provider's portal. Under my account, I could see both vehicles listed with their VIN numbers, coverage levels, and renewal dates. I selected Derek's truck first. The system asked me to confirm removal. It noted that per state regulations, the insured party would receive written notification of the coverage change within 10 to 14 business days, and that coverage would remain active during that notification period. I confirmed. Then I selected Emily's sedan and did the same. 2 clicks. Done. Next, I opened the account management page for my mobile carrier. 11 years ago, when family plans first became common, I had added Emily to my account because the math made sense, 4 lines for the price of 2.5. When Derek came along, I added his line as well. Together, their 2 lines cost me $180 each month. I navigated to the line management section, selected Derek's number, and chose the option to separate it into an independent account. The system informed me that his service would continue uninterrupted, but billing would transfer to whatever payment method he provided within 72 hours. I did the same for Emily's line. 2 more clicks. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. The last item on my list was the home maintenance account. 4 years ago, I had set up an automatic payment arrangement with a local contractor, a man named Bud Holloway, who did general repairs, authorizing him to bill my account directly for any work requested at Derek and Emily's address. It had started with a leaking gutter, then a fence post. Then gradually, quietly, it had become the arrangement they relied on without discussing. I pulled up the authorization form I had signed, found Bud's number in my contacts, and called him directly. He picked up on the second ring. "Bill, Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Bud. I'm calling to cancel the open billing authorization on the Walsh property on Crescent Drive. Effective immediately." A brief pause. "Everything okay over there?" "Everything's fine," I said. "Just restructuring some accounts. Any outstanding invoices should come directly to Derek Walsh going forward. He can give you his payment information." "Sure thing," Bud said. "I'll update it today. You need anything done at your place?" "Not right now," I said. "I'll call you in the spring." I hung up and opened the notebook again. I found a blank line at the bottom of the page and wrote the date. Then I wrote 3 entries: auto insurance, mobile carrier contractor authorization, and beside each one I wrote the monthly amount I had been paying. $420. $180. The contractor averaged $240 a month over the past year. I drew a line under the 3 figures and added them. $840 a month, not counting the occasional larger repairs I had handled without recording. Not counting the holiday money, the birthday checks, the times I had simply handed Derek cash for something he said was urgent and that I never asked about afterward. I sat with that number for a while. Not with anger. Anger would have been too simple and too satisfying, and I had never trusted either. With something more like clarity. The kind that comes when you finally look directly at a thing you have been looking slightly past for years. I closed the notebook. I closed the laptop. I stood up, stretched my back, and carried my empty coffee cup to the kitchen. On the counter beside the sink, Dorothy had left a note before she drove away. It said, "I'll call you tonight." I set the note face down next to the dish rack. The kitchen was clean and quiet, and entirely mine. I put on my coat and went out to the garage. I had a woodworking project I had been putting off for 3 weeks, a small bookshelf Ray had asked me to build for Maggie's reading corner. It was time to get started on it. The work was straightforward. Good wood, clean cuts, honest joints. Nothing hidden in the walls. The invitation came through Dorothy, which told me everything I needed to know about whose idea it was. She called on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying the careful brightness of someone working hard to sound casual, and told me that Tyler's 9th birthday party was on Sunday the 14th, that Emily had reserved the back room at a place called Breckenridge Grill, and that it would mean a great deal to Tyler if his grandfather came. "He asked for you specifically," Dorothy said. That part I believed. Tyler was 9 years old and had not yet learned to want things strategically. Everything he wanted simply and out loud. That was the part of him I loved most. I told Dorothy I would be there. I spent Saturday afternoon in the garage building Tyler's gift. I had asked him in November what he wanted most, and he had said a wooden go-kart, the way children say things they do not expect to actually receive, hopefully, with a kind of wistful disbelief. I had been working on it in spare hours since Thanksgiving. It was not a toy store go-kart with plastic panels and a sticker kit. It was solid pine hand-sanded with real rubber wheels and a steering mechanism I had engineered from scratch. I painted it red because Tyler had mentioned once offhand that red was the fastest color. I loaded it into the truck bed on Sunday morning and drove to Breckenridge Grill. The back room was loud, with the particular energy of 9-year-olds who had been given cake and an indoor space simultaneously. Streamers hung from the dropped ceiling panels. A banner above the door read, "Tyler is 9" in letters someone had clearly printed at an office supply store that morning. Balloon clusters in blue and silver were tied to every chair back. Derek's colleagues filled the adult section of the room. Men in sport coats, women in holiday casual attire, everybody holding drinks and talking in the manner of people performing enjoyment rather than experiencing it. Frank Walsh was stationed near the bar with a glass of something amber and the proprietary ease of a man who considered himself the true host of any room he occupied. I did not see Derek immediately. I set the go-kart down near the gift table and was unwrapping the cloth I had used to protect the finish when Tyler found me. He came at a dead run from across the room, sneakers squeaking on the tile floor, and hit me around the midsection with the full force of a 9-year-old who had been looking forward to something. I grabbed him before either of us went over. "Grandpa." He said it with the complete satisfaction of someone arriving exactly where they meant to be. "Hey, bud." I held him a moment, then set him back and looked at him. He had Emily's eyes and a gap in his front teeth that had not been there at Thanksgiving. "Happy birthday." He spotted the go-kart immediately. His mouth dropped open. He walked toward it the way people walk toward things they cannot quite believe are real, slowly reaching out one hand before the rest of him caught up. He ran his palm along the side panel and looked up at me. "You made this?" "I did," I said. "By yourself?" "Every piece," I said. His eyes went wide and bright in a way that no gift from a store had ever made them go in my experience, because a store-bought thing comes from a catalog, but a made thing comes from a person, and children understand the difference, even when they cannot articulate it. Derek appeared at Tyler's shoulder. He looked at the go-kart with an expression that rearranged itself quickly, surprise first, then something calculated moving underneath. "Wow," he said. "That's quite a project, Dad." He put his hand on Tyler's back and steered him gently but firmly away. "Hey, bud, go find Mom and show her okay. Tell her Grandpa's here." Tyler took off across the room, clutching the go-kart's steering handle, and Derek watched him go before turning back to me. "Glad you came," Derek said. He smiled the way he smiled in his professional headshot, full and practiced and revealing nothing. "Can I get you a drink?" "I'm fine," I said. He led me toward the quieter end of the room, away from the children, and the noise with the smooth purposefulness of a man conducting a meeting he had scheduled in advance. On the table in the corner sat a leather portfolio, the kind used for closing documents in real estate transactions. I had seen Derek carry one like it 100 times. "I actually wanted to talk to you about something," Derek said. He picked up the portfolio and held it loosely, the way you hold something you are about to present. "I've got a development deal coming together, mixed-use property, waterfront access, strong projected returns. The financing is mostly in place, but the bank is asking for a co-signer on the primary note." He paused. A co-signer is someone who guarantees the loan alongside the borrower. If the borrower defaults for any reason, the co-signer is equally responsible for the full amount. In this case, that would be $480,000. He said it evenly, like a reasonable number, like something a grandfather does. "I know what a co-signer is, Derek," I said. He nodded. "Of course. I just wanted to be clear about—" "And I know what that portfolio is," I said. "I could see your colleague's name on the tab from across the room 20 minutes ago." Derek's smile held. His jaw did not. I picked up my jacket from the back of the nearest chair. I looked across the room to where Tyler was showing Dorothy the go-kart, running his hand along the painted side panel and talking rapidly, his whole body animated with the specific joy of a child who has been understood. I walked over and crouched down beside my grandson. I put my hand on his shoulder. "I have to head out, bud," I said quietly. "You have a great birthday, okay?" Tyler grabbed my arm with both hands. "Don't go yet, Grandpa." My chest pulled tight in a way I had not expected. "I'll see you soon," I said. "I promise." I stood. I looked at Derek across the room. He was watching me with the stillness of a man recalculating. "The answer is no, Derek," I said just loud enough for him to hear. "It was no before you asked." I walked out through the front of the restaurant into the cold January air and did not look back through the window. But I thought about Tyler's hand on the go-kart all the way home. The way he had said you made this by yourself, like it was the most remarkable thing he had ever encountered. Maybe it was. The last Tuesday of January arrived cold and bright, the kind of winter morning that looks warmer through a window than it actually is. I was in the backyard splitting firewood when I heard a truck door slam out front with the particular force of someone who had not decided yet whether they were going to be reasonable about whatever came next. I set the splitting maul against the woodpile and walked around the side of the house. Derek was standing on my front porch with his phone held up like a piece of evidence at a hearing. He was wearing his work jacket, the charcoal gray one with the real estate company logo on the chest, and his face had the high color of a man who had driven faster than the speed limit to get somewhere. He jabbed the phone toward me before I reached the bottom porch step. "I got an email this morning from the insurance company saying our vehicles are no longer covered under your policy. And Bud Holloway called me yesterday, asking for my credit card, because apparently his authorization to bill your account has been revoked." He pulled a sharp breath. "What did you do?" I climbed the 2 porch steps and opened the front door. "Come inside," I said. "It's cold." He followed me into the kitchen, still holding the phone up, though there was no one left to show it to. I went to the counter and poured 2 cups of coffee. I set one in front of him. He did not touch it. "William." His voice had dropped from the high register of the driveway to something lower and more deliberate. "I am asking you directly what is going on. I removed you and Emily from my insurance policy," I said. "I separated your phone lines from my account, and I canceled the open billing authorization with Bud." I wrapped both hands around my own cup. All 3 were accounts in my name that I was paying voluntarily. I've decided to stop. Derek stared at me. "Because of Christmas dinner?" "Because you are 41 years old," I said. "You have a full-time income. Emily has a full-time income. The 2 of you are more than capable of managing your own expenses. I should have made that adjustment years ago." His jaw tightened. "You could have warned us, given us some notice. The insurance alone, we could have had a gap in coverage. Do you understand what that means legally if either of us had been in an accident during that window?" "The policy change was submitted on December 28th, I said. "Per state regulations, you received written notification within 14 business days. That notification arrived at your address on January 10th. Today is January 30th. I looked at him steadily. "You had 3 weeks of notice, Derek." The letter explained everything. His mouth opened, then closed. He had not read the letter. I could see it in the half-second of recalibration behind his eyes, the moment when a man realizes the argument he prepared does not fit the facts in front of him. "The phones," he started, "were on a family plan under my name and my payment method," I said. "I am the account holder. I have the right to modify the plan at any time. Your carrier sent you a text message on December 29th informing you that your line was being transferred to an independent account, and asking you to provide payment information within 72 hours. If there was a service interruption, it was because that step was not completed. Derek pulled out the chair across from me and sat down heavily. He put his phone face down on the table. He rubbed one hand across his jaw and looked at the kitchen wall behind my head, the way people look at walls when they are trying to find the argument that should be there but isn't. When we don't have the cash flow right now to just absorb all of this, he said. His voice had lost its edge and taken on something that might have been honesty, though with Derek I had learned to verify before trusting. Between the mortgage and Tyler's school and the development project I've been putting capital into, this timing is genuinely terrible, William. I understand cash flow is tight, I said. That's worth thinking about. He looked at me sharply. Meaning what, Meaning a man who is stretched thin financially should probably think carefully before committing capital to speculative development projects, I said. And before inviting his father-in-law to co-sign a $480,000 note. The color in Derek's face shifted. The red of anger gave way to something darker and quieter. That's what this is about, he said. This is about 41 years old and capable, I said. That's all it has ever been about. He sat for another moment. Then he pushed back from the table and stood. He picked up his phone. He looked at the untouched coffee cup for a second, then at me. Sarah is going to lose her mind when I tell her this was intentional, he said. Emily, I said. He blinked. What? Her name is Emily, I said. You called her Sarah. Something crossed his face that I did not have a name for. He straightened his jacket, turned, and walked out of the kitchen. The front door opened and closed behind him. Not a slam this time. Something more controlled, and therefore more deliberate. I stood at the kitchen counter and listened to his truck start in the driveway. I listened to it back out and pull away down the street. I opened the small leather notebook on the counter. I found the page I wanted and wrote the date at the top of a fresh line. Then I wrote 3 words underneath it. Held the line. I closed the notebook. I finished my coffee. Then I went back outside to finish splitting the firewood, because the wood still needed splitting, and the morning was still cold, and those 2 facts had nothing to do with Derek Walsh. Ray and Maggie Donahue had a dining room that smelled like wood smoke and pot roast, and 40 years of people being genuinely welcome in it. The table was round, which Maggie had always said was intentional. No head, no foot, nobody sitting above anybody else. I had eaten at that table more times than I could count, and it had never once felt like anything other than exactly what it was. Maggie set a plate in front of me without asking what I wanted, because she already knew. Pot roast, roasted carrots, a biscuit on the side. Ray poured coffee and sat down across from me with the unhurried ease of a man who had nowhere else to be, and considered that a form of wealth. Frank Walsh has been busy, Ray said, cutting into his roast. I looked up. Paulette Greer told Maggie. Paulette's husband golfs with somebody who knows Frank from his Scottsdale days. Ray set his knife down. Apparently Frank has been telling people around town that you abandoned your family, that you cut Derek and Emily off without warning out of spite, and that Dorothy is staying with them because she doesn't feel safe at home. The biscuit in my hand went very still. Dorothy is staying with them because she chose to, I said. She comes home every few days. She was here Thursday. I know that, Ray said. Paulette knows that. Most people who actually know you know that. He picked his knife back up. Frank Walsh is not talking to people who know you. Maggie reached over and refilled my coffee without being asked. It was the kind of thing she did quiet, practical, the gesture of a woman who understood, that sometimes the best thing you can offer a person is warmth without commentary. "What else?" I said. It was not a question. Ray exhaled through his nose. "Derek and Emily have been fighting. Loud enough that the Kowalski boy next door mentioned it to his mother, who mentioned it to Paulette." He paused, organizing what came next. Apparently, Derek told Emily that her father had no right to pull the rug out from under them, and Emily told Derek that if he hadn't spent Christmas dinner treating her father like something he tracked in on his shoe, none of this would have happened. I set my biscuit down. Something moved through my chest, not quite surprise, not quite satisfaction. Something more complicated than either. "She said that?" I asked. "Word for word according to Paulette, according to the Kowalski boy." Ray shrugged. "Small-town information travels in circles. You know how it works." I did know. I had lived in this town for 31 years. I had rewired half the houses on 4 separate streets. People told their electricians things they did not tell their neighbors, and their neighbors told everyone else. "Frank is also demanding money," Maggie said. She said it matter-of-factly, the way she delivered any information she considered important, directly without cushioning. Ray heard from Pete Garland that Frank has been calling Derek every week asking for $800 a month to cover his living expenses in Scottsdale. Apparently, Frank's retirement savings are considerably less impressive than he let on. I thought about Frank Walsh at the Christmas dinner table swirling his wine, telling me that electricians don't leave anything behind worth mentioning. I thought about his pocket square and his sport coat and his loud laugh at his own jokes. He positioned himself as the successful one. I said. "They usually do," Maggie said, and went back to her pot roast. Ray looked at me across the round table. "Here is what I keep thinking about," he said. Derek and Emily built their whole financial picture around things that were not theirs. Your insurance, your phone plan, Bud Holloway on your account. Whatever else you were covering that we don't know about. They built on top of your foundation and then told you the house was theirs. He shook his head slowly. And Frank Walsh did the exact same thing to Derek. Spent 30 years performing success so his son would believe it and support him when the performance ended. I sat with that for a moment. The fire in Ray and Maggie's fireplace popped once and settled. "The apple," I said, "doesn't tend to roll far?" Ray agreed. We ate without talking for a little while. Outside the dining room window, the February sky was the flat white of a day deciding whether to snow. A cardinal landed on Maggie's bird feeder, bright red against the gray, and sat there eating sunflower seeds with complete indifference to everything happening on the other side of the glass. "Dorothy called me yesterday," I said finally. Ray looked up. "She said the house is tense, that Derek and Emily argue after Tyler goes to bed, and that she can hear it through the walls." I drank my coffee. She said she misses her garden. "Her tulip bulbs went in October," Maggie said quietly. "She planted them herself. They'll be coming up in April." "I know," I said. Ray put his fork down and looked at me with the direct, unhurried attention he reserved for things that mattered. "Bill," he said, "what do you want to happen? Not what do you think should happen, not what's fair, what do you actually want?" I looked at the cardinal on the feeder. It finished what it wanted, spread its wings, and was gone. "I want my wife to come home," I said. "I want my daughter to choose who she actually is rather than who Derek needs her to be." Ray nodded once, slowly. The way he nodded when he agreed with something completely and had nothing to add to it. Maggie stood up and began clearing plates. "Then eat your biscuit," she said. "It's getting cold." I picked it up and ate it. It was good. Everything Maggie made was good because she made it with attention and without apology, and in my experience, those were the two ingredients that mattered most in anything worth doing. Tyler showed up on a Saturday morning with his backpack on and his shoelaces untied the way he showed up, to most things enthusiastically and slightly unprepared. Emily had dropped him off at the curb without coming to the door, which had become the arrangement over the past several weeks. I did not push it. Tyler was here, and that was the part that mattered. He burst through the front door and immediately began telling me about a video he had watched about how volcanoes worked, covering approximately 4 separate topics before finishing any of them, which was also how he showed up to most things. I got him a glass of milk and a plate of the oatmeal cookies I had made the day before, and he ate 3 of them in the time it took me to get my coat from the hook by the door. "Can we go in the yard?" he asked, already heading for the back door. "That's exactly where I was going," I said. The February yard was still mostly brown and dormant, but the beds along the south fence were beginning to show the first faint green of early bulbs working their way up through the cold ground. Dorothy's tulips. They were right on schedule. I noticed them every morning when I had my coffee, and every morning I thought about what Maggie had said. She misses her garden. Tyler crouched beside the bed and pressed one finger into the soil next to a small green shoot, deeply curious in the way children are curious when they have not yet been told that dirt is something to stay clean of. "What are these tulips?" I said. "Your grandmother planted them in October." He looked up at me. "Is Grandma Dorothy coming back?" "Yes," I said. "She is." He seemed to accept that with the completeness that children accept things they trust. He stood back up and followed me to the corner of the yard, where I kept a section of raised garden bed I used for spring vegetables. I had been meaning to turn the soil for 2 weeks. Today was as good a day as any. I handed Tyler the smaller trowel and kept the cultivator for myself. We worked side by side, turning the dark soil, not saying much. Tyler was one of the rare children who could be quiet without being bored. He went quiet the same way he went busy, fully and without self-consciousness. I had always appreciated that about him. We had been working for about 20 minutes when he sat back on his heels and looked at his dirt-covered gloves with satisfaction. "Grandpa," he said, "our heat broke. I kept turning the soil." "When was that?" "Like 2 weeks ago, maybe. There was a smell and then a loud noise, and then it just stopped working." He pulled a small stone out of the dirt and examined it. "Daddy said some bad words." "I imagine he did," I said. "A man came to fix it, but he said it was the electrical panel, and it would cost a lot." Tyler put the stone in his pocket, the way he put most interesting things in his pocket. $4,200. I heard Daddy say the number on the phone. I rested the cultivator against my knee for a moment. "That's a significant repair," I said carefully. Daddy was really upset. Tyler pulled out another stone and weighed it in his palm. He kept saying it wasn't supposed to be that much. The man said the panel was real old, and somebody had done some of the wiring wrong a long time ago, and it all needed to be replaced. He looked up at me with his grandmother's eyes. "Daddy knows you do electricity, right, Grandpa?" I turned the cultivator slowly in my hands. "He does," I said. "So how come he didn't just call you?" Tyler asked. The question came out with the guileless logic of a child who sees a straight line between a problem and its obvious solution, and cannot understand why the adults around him are walking in circles instead. I looked at my grandson for a long moment. He was watching me with genuine curiosity, waiting for the answer the way he waited for answers about volcanoes and tulip bulbs, openly without agenda, because he actually wanted to know. "That's a good question, Bud," I said. "I don't have a great answer for you." Tyler considered this. He was quiet for a moment, turning the stone over in his fingers. Then he said, in the same conversational tone he used to discuss most things, "Mom said we shouldn't ask you for stuff right now. She said you and Daddy had a disagreement and it wasn't polite to ask for favors until things got sorted out." He looked at his stone. "But $4,000 seems like a lot." The February air moved through the yard, cold and clean. A neighbor's dog barked twice from 2 streets over, and then stopped. "It is a lot," I said. Tyler stood up and came to stand beside me at the garden bed. He looked down at the turned soil with the serious expression he sometimes wore when he was working something out. Then he slipped his dirty gloved hand into mine and held it, not because he needed to, not because he was cold or tired, but simply because he was 9 years old, and I was his grandfather. And that was reason enough. I held his hand and looked at Dorothy's tulip shoots along the south fence, pressing up through the cold ground toward something they could not yet see, but were growing toward anyway. The panel at Derek's house needed $4,200 worth of work. Work I could have done in a long weekend for the cost of materials. I reached into my coat pocket with my free hand and found the small leather notebook I had started carrying with me. I took it out and opened it to the current page and wrote the date. Then I wrote Feb $4,200. Paid to someone else. I put the notebook away. Tyler was still holding my hand, looking at the garden. "Grandpa," he said, "when the tulips come up, can we show Grandma Dorothy together?" My throat closed in a way I had not prepared for. I looked down at the top of his head, his dark hair going every direction in the February wind, and I felt something shift in my chest that had been stuck there since Christmas Eve. "Yes," I said, "we absolutely can." Before I reveal what happened next, drop the number 1 or type yes in the comments right now so I know you're still here with me. And please note the story following this contains some fictional elements and may not be entirely factual. If you prefer not to listen to fictionalized drama, feel free to turn off the video right here. Tax season in my house had always meant the same thing. The filing cabinet came out from the corner of the study. The kitchen table became a sorting surface, and I spent the better part of a weekend going through 12 months of receipts, statements, and documents with the same methodical attention I gave to a panel inspection. Everything in its place. Nothing assumed. Every number verified against every other number until the picture was complete and accurate. I had started the process on a Saturday morning in early March, working through the previous year's records in chronological order. Utility bills, property tax statements, retirement account distributions, medical expenses. I worked steadily through the morning with the radio on low, a country station coffee going cold at my elbow the way it always did when I was focused. It was in the 2021 folder that I found it. I nearly set it aside without reading it. It was clipped to a copy of a homeowner's insurance renewal form from that year, and at first glance, it looked like part of the same packet. But the paper was a different weight, and when I unclipped it and held it up, I saw that it was not an insurance form at all. It was a limited financial power of attorney document. In the state where we lived, a limited financial power of attorney is a legal instrument that grants a designated person, called the agent, the authority to act on behalf of the signing party in specific financial matters for a defined period of time. This particular document named Derek Walsh as the agent and William Carter as the principal. It was signed with my signature, dated 2 years and 4 months earlier. It authorized Derek Walsh to access and manage funds in a specific savings account held in my name at a bank I had used for personal savings since before Emily was born. I sat down in the kitchen chair. I read the document again, slowly. The way I read wiring schematics when something did not add up, starting from the beginning, following each line, looking for the point where the circuit diverged from what it was supposed to do. I remembered the afternoon Derek had brought the papers. He had come alone on a weekday, saying that Emily had asked him to drop off some insurance forms that needed my signature as part of a policy update on their homeowner's coverage. I had been in the middle of a woodworking project. I had glanced at the pages, seen my name and address on the header, and signed where Derek indicated with the casual trust of a man who believed his son-in-law was exactly who he presented himself to be. I put the document face down on the table. I went to my laptop and logged into the bank's online portal. The savings account in question had held $14,300 in the spring of 2021. I had not looked at it closely in some time, because it was not a working account. It was a reserve I kept for emergencies, funded incrementally over years, not something I monitored monthly. The current balance was $7,900. $6,400 had been withdrawn in 3 separate transactions over a period of 8 months, beginning 6 weeks after the document was signed. The transaction descriptions listed a name I did not recognize, which in my experience meant the withdrawal had gone through an intermediary account, a common way to put distance between a transaction and its origin. I closed the laptop. I sat in the kitchen and looked at the document on the table. I was not shaking. I noticed that specifically that my hands were flat and still on the tabletop, that my breathing was even, that the loudest thing in the room was the refrigerator cycling on. I had spent 40 years working around electrical current that could kill a man if he panicked. And the first thing every good electrician learns is that panic is more dangerous than the voltage. You assess, you isolate, you make the situation safe, then you fix it. I picked up my phone and called Ray. He answered on the second ring. Bill. Ray, do you know a good attorney, not for court, just for paperwork? Someone who handles financial matters, power of attorney, that kind of thing. A brief pause. Tom Garrett. Handles a estate and financial law office on Birchwood Avenue. I've used him twice. Good man, straight talker. Another pause. Bill, what happened? I found something in my tax records, I said. Nothing I can't handle. I just want to make sure my accounts are properly protected going forward. Do you want me to come over? No, I said. I'm all right. I'll call Tom Monday morning. I hung up. I found a manila envelope in the desk drawer and placed the power of attorney document inside it. I sealed it, wrote the date on the front, and wrote the word documentation in my own hand beneath the date. Then I went back to the bank portal and began the process of requesting closure of the compromised account and transfer of the remaining balance to a new account, in my name only. The bank's online system indicated the process would take 3 to 5 business days and that I would receive written confirmation by mail. I submitted the request. I closed the laptop. A limited financial power of attorney expires at the end of its defined period, which in this document was 18 months from the signing date. That period had already elapsed, meaning Derek no longer held any legal authority over my finances. But the withdrawals had happened within the active period, which meant they were technically authorized by the instrument he had obtained through misrepresentation. Civil fraud of this kind, obtaining a signature through deliberate deception, is actionable in court, but pursuing it would take time and attention I did not want to give Derek Walsh. What I wanted was simpler. I wanted my money protected. I wanted my name on nothing he could touch. I put the envelope in the filing cabinet in the back of the hanging folder marked "Personal Important" behind my passport and my original union card. Then I sat down and finished my taxes. Every number in order. Every account verified. Every line exactly what it appeared to be. April came in, the way it always does in this part of the country, tentatively. At first, one warm day followed by 2 cold ones, the ground unable to decide whether it was done with winter. But by the 2nd week, the decision had been made for it. The tulips along the south fence had pushed up fully red and yellow and one deep purple that Dorothy had planted, without telling me what color it would be, which was the kind of small surprise she had always been good at. I was in the yard repairing a section of the fence along the back property line when Tyler arrived. I heard the side gate and his sneakers on the path before I saw him, and I heard something else too. The particular quality of quiet that meant Emily had not come to the door again. She had been doing that since January. I had stopped expecting otherwise. Tyler came around the corner of the house and stopped when he saw the tulips. His mouth opened. He walked toward them the way he had walked toward the go-kart at his birthday, slowly, like something he needed to approach carefully to make sure it was real. He crouched down in front of the purple one and looked at it for a long moment without touching it. "Grandma Dorothy's?" he asked. "Every one of them," I said. He stood up and came to help me with the fence, which mostly meant handing me tools when I asked for them and asking questions about everything else. How did I know which board was rotten? Why did wood rot at the bottom and not the top? What happened to the wood after it rotted? Did it just become dirt? I answered every question as directly as I could, because in my experience, children ask the questions they actually want answered and deserve the same in return. We worked through the morning. I replaced 2 boards and reset a fence post that had shifted over the winter. Tyler handed me screws and held the level when I asked him to, and ate half a granola bar he found in his jacket pocket, offering me the other half with the uncomplicated generosity of a child who does not yet calculate the cost of sharing. I took it. It was peanut butter. It was good. We were sitting on the back steps, taking a break. Tyler with a glass of water, and me with my coffee. Coffee when he looked out at the yard, with the expression he sometimes wore when something was working itself out behind his eyes. "Grandpa," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Always," I said. He was quiet for a moment, turning his water glass in both hands. "How come you and Daddy don't talk anymore?" I set my coffee cup down on the step beside me. "We've had some disagreements," I said carefully. "Grown-up stuff. It happens sometimes." Tyler nodded slowly, processing this. Then he said, still looking at the yard, "Daddy told Uncle Pete that you were useless now that you retired, that you didn't have anything useful left to give." He turned and looked at me with his grandmother's eyes, clear and direct, and entirely without cruelty. "But that doesn't make sense to me. You fixed the fence. You made my go-kart. You know how electricity works." He pulled his eyebrows together in the concentrated frown of a child confronting a logical inconsistency. "How can somebody be useless if they know how to do all that stuff?" The April air moved through the yard. Somewhere in the neighbor's oak tree, a bird I couldn't see was working very hard on something. I looked at my grandson sitting beside me on the back steps with his water glass and his dirty sneakers and his complete unself-conscious honesty, and I felt the full weight of what he had just handed me land in my chest, without warning. Not the anger. I had made my peace with the anger weeks ago. It was something else, something closer to grief and something closer to gratitude, occupying the same space at the same time, the way strong feelings sometimes insist on doing. I picked up the fence board I had replaced the rotten one and turned it in my hands. "Tyler, you know how this board went bad?" He looked at it. "It rotted." "That's right. But here's the thing about rot. It doesn't happen because the wood is weak. It happens because the wood got put in conditions that weren't right for it. Too much moisture, not enough air, nobody checking on it." I set the board down. "The wood was never the problem. The conditions were. Tyler looked at the board for a long moment. Then he looked at me. I could see him turning the idea over, fitting it against what he already knew, the way he fit rocks into his pocket carefully to see if they belonged there. "So you're not useless," he said. "You were just in bad conditions." "Something like that," I said. He nodded with the complete seriousness of a 9-year-old who has just resolved something important. Then he finished his water, set the glass on the step, and stood up. "Can we check on the tulips before I go home?" "That's exactly what I was going to suggest," I said. We walked along the south fence together, Tyler pointing at each color and asking its name, me telling him what I knew and admitting what I didn't. At the purple one, he stopped and crouched down again and looked at it for a long time. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "I think Grandma Dorothy should come home and see these." My throat closed. I pressed my thumbnail hard into my palm, a habit I had picked up somewhere without noticing, the way you pick up habits that belong to people you love. "I think so too, bud," I said. I watched him walk out through the side gate, backpack bouncing, shoelaces still untied. Then I stood alone in the April yard beside Dorothy's tulips, and I took the small notebook from my coat pocket and opened it to the current page and wrote the date. Then I wrote April Tyler. He sees clearly. He always has. I put the notebook away. I went inside and picked up the phone. I dialed Dorothy's number. It rang twice. She picked up. "William," she said. Just my name. But the way she said it told me she had been waiting for me to call. "The tulips came up," I said. "All of them. There's a purple one you didn't warn me about." A silence. Then very quietly, "I know. I was hoping you'd like it." "Come home, Dorothy," I said. "Tyler wants to show you." Dorothy came home on a Wednesday afternoon in late April with her overnight bag, her book club tote-in, and the particular expression of a woman who has made a decision and arrived at the far side of it. She walked through the front door, set her bag down in the hallway, and stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at the room the way you look at something you have been away from long enough to see it clearly again. I was at the stove making soup. I did not make a production of her arrival. I asked if she was hungry. She said yes. She washed her hands at the sink and set the table without being asked, and we ate together for the first time since Christmas Eve. And the soup was good, and neither of us said anything that needed to be said quite yet, because some things settle better when you give them room. That evening, she went out to the south fence and stood in front of her tulips for a long time. I watched her from the kitchen window. She did not know I was watching. She touched the purple one with 2 fingers very gently, the way you touch something you were not sure would still be there. May arrived, and the tulips gave way to the first warm days of the year. Dorothy reclaimed her garden with the focused energy of someone making up for lost time, pruning, planting, reorganizing the herb bed along the back wall. The house felt different with her in it. Not loudly different. The kind of different you notice the way you notice correct voltage after working in a circuit that has been running low for months. I had settled back into my own routines. Morning coffee on the porch, woodworking in the afternoons. The consulting project with Tom Garrett on my financial reorganization was wrapping up, all accounts properly titled, all authorizations reviewed, and cleaned up, everything exactly as it should be. It was on a Tuesday morning in the second week of May that my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Area code. I knew the city where I had worked for the last 12 years of my career before the county job. I answered it. "Mr. Carter." A woman's voice, professional and direct. "My name is Carol Bennett. I'm the project director for infrastructure development at Consolidated Power Services. I got your name from Ray Donahue. He said you were the best electrical systems consultant he had ever worked alongside, and that I would be making a mistake not to call you. I set my coffee cup down. Ray is generous, I said. Ray is accurate, she said. I have a project I need help with. We're retrofitting the electrical distribution infrastructure for a residential development on the north side, 412 units, mixed-age housing. The grid work is complicated, and our current consultants are giving me answers I don't fully trust. A brief pause. I need someone who has actually done this work, not someone who has managed people who did it. Someone who understands what happens inside the walls. I leaned back in my chair. Outside the kitchen window, Dorothy was moving through the herb bed with her pruning shears, stopping every few feet, considering deciding. What's the timeline? I asked. 6 months, Carol said. Starting June 1st, if you're available. I can send you the project specifications today, so you have a full picture before we talk terms. Send them, I said. I'll read them tonight. We arranged to meet at her office the following Thursday. She thanked me and ended the call with the efficiency of a person who respected other people's time, which I appreciated immediately. I sat at the kitchen table for a moment. Then I got up, went to the back door and called to Dorothy. She looked up from the herb bed, shielding her eyes against the May morning sun. I have a meeting Thursday, I said. Someone wants to hire me as a consultant on a power grid project. Dorothy lowered her pruning shears. Hire you, she repeated. Not a question. Something more like a reckoning. 6 months, I said. Carol Bennett, project director at Consolidated Power. Dorothy looked at me for a moment, with an expression I had not seen in some time. Pride, plainly and without qualification, the kind that does not need to announce itself. She turned back to her herbs. Tell her yes, she said. I called Ray that afternoon. He answered before the second ring. She called, I said. I know, he said. She called me after to say she'd spoken with you. Bill, she's serious. This is a real project. Real money. She's sending specs today, I said. The contract would be 6 months independent consulting. I'd file it as self-employment income, pay the quarterly estimated taxes the same way I handled union work. I paused. The number she mentioned was $85,000. Ray was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. 85,000, he said slowly. For the useless old electrician, I said. He laughed. It came out full and unrestrained, the laugh of a man genuinely delighted, and I found myself laughing with him, which was something I had not really done since before Christmas. It felt like a door opening in a room that had been shut a long time. Don't tell anyone the number, I said when we had both settled. Bill Haram. Ray said, I already told Maggie. Ray. She wanted to know. She specifically asked. A pause. She said, and I am quoting directly, that Frank Walsh could take his pocket square and his Scottsdale condo and consider what it means that a retired electrician just out-earned his entire retirement savings in 6 months. I pressed my hand flat against the kitchen table and looked at the ceiling. Tell Maggie thank you, I said. She also made a pie, Ray said. She says you're coming for dinner Friday. I looked out the window at Dorothy moving through the garden, unhurried, purposeful, exactly where she was supposed to be. Tell her we'll both be there, I said. The conversation Dorothy and I needed to have waited until the first Saturday of June, which was right. Some conversations cannot be rushed into. They need the right conditions, enough time passed, enough quiet in the house, enough of the ordinary restored, before you can sit down with the extraordinary and give it the attention it deserves. She brought it up herself. We were on the back porch after dinner the June evening, warm and unhurried, the garden, doing what gardens do in early summer, filling in, settling, becoming more fully itself. I had my coffee. The sun was going down somewhere behind the neighbor's oak tree, and the light across the yard was the particular gold of early June that I had always thought was the best light of the year. "I need to say something," Dorothy said. "All right," I said. She looked at her glass. "I should have come home with you that night, Christmas Eve, when you asked me." Her voice was steady, but it cost her something to keep it that way. I could hear the effort in it, the deliberate control of a woman who had been thinking about this for 6 months and had decided she was going to say it completely. I chose the path of least resistance. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but I wasn't keeping anything. I was just not choosing. And not choosing was its own choice, and it was the wrong one. I listened. I did not interrupt. "I watched Derek say those things to you, and I sat there." Her jaw tightened. "I have spent 43 years watching you show up for this family. Every single time. And the one time you needed me to show up for you, I looked at my coffee cup." She pressed her lips together hard for a moment. "I am sorry, William. I am genuinely, completely sorry." The gold light moved across the garden. Dorothy's herb bed along the back wall was full and green and smelling of rosemary and thyme. "I know you are," I said. "Is that enough?" she asked. I thought about it honestly, the way she deserved. "It's a start," I said, "and a good one." She exhaled long and slow, the breath of someone who has been holding something heavy and has finally set it down. She reached over and put her hand on top of mine on the armrest. I turned my hand over and held hers. We sat like that for a while. The oak tree went dark. The fireflies started up in the far corner of the yard, small and intermittent, the way they always started before they found their rhythm. "Emily called me this morning," Dorothy said. I waited. "Oh, she said Derek wants to come and talk to you. That things have been very difficult financially, and that he was hoping—" She paused, choosing the next words carefully, that a conversation might help clear the air. I drank my coffee. "Set the cup down, Dorothy, hon," I said. "I love you. I will take care of you for the rest of my life, and I will do it gladly, because that is what I signed up for 43 years ago, and I meant every word of it." I looked at her directly. "But I will not give Derek Walsh another dollar. I will not cover another bill, co-sign another document, or authorize another arrangement that puts my name behind his decisions. That is not going to change regardless of what he says when he comes here." Dorothy looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were bright, but her chin was level, and her hand stayed in mine without pulling back. "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not asking you to. I just needed you to know it was coming." "I appreciate that," I said. "And Emily is trying," Dorothy said. "I want you to know that. She and Derek fight constantly now. She told me last week that she wished she had stood up at that dinner. She was crying when she said it." Dorothy's grip on my hand tightened slightly. "She's not the same person she was in December, William." "Good," I said. And I meant it without bitterness, good the way you mean it when a bone that was broken starts healing correctly. It is not pleasant, but it is exactly what should happen. "Will you see her?" Dorothy asked. "Emily is my daughter," I said. "My door is always open to her. It always will be." I paused. "Derek is welcome too if he comes honestly. But I will know the difference, Dorothy. I always have." She nodded. She believed me. That was the thing about Dorothy. After 43 years, she knew when I meant something completely, and she did not argue with it. The fireflies were fully going now, dozens of them drifting through the dark, lower air of the yard with their small, cold light. Tyler had loved fireflies, as a smaller child. I remembered he had chased them around this yard with a mason jar and a look of absolute focused joy. He would again, I thought. There would be summer evenings ahead for that. "William," Dorothy said. "Yes. When I was at Emily's, I heard them arguing through the walls almost every night." She was quiet for a moment. "Derek said something once he didn't know I could hear. He said that he had underestimated you." She looked at me. Those were his exact words. I underestimated him. I looked out at the fireflies moving through the garden my wife had planted and tended and come back to. "He wasn't wrong," I said. Dorothy made a sound that was almost a laugh, and not quite which was its own kind of answer. She squeezed my hand once firmly, and then we sat together in the summer dark and let the evening do what evenings do, move slowly through its stages toward something quieter and more complete. The coffee went cold. The fireflies kept going. Neither of us moved to go inside. There was nowhere else either of us needed to be. They came on a Sunday afternoon 2 weeks later, Derek and Emily together, which told me this had been coordinated in advance, and that the coordination had been Derek's idea. Emily would not have planned it this way. Emily, when she came to difficult conversations, came alone and early, and with her hands already open. This arrival Sunday, 2 o'clock, both of them together, had the structured feel of a presentation. I had known they were coming. Dorothy had texted Emily the night before to confirm the time. I spent the morning working in the garage, finishing the bookshelf I had started for Maggie's reading corner back in January. It was good work. Solid oak, clean joinery, the kind of piece that would outlast everyone in the room. I sanded the final panel, applied the last coat of finish, and set it to dry. Then I washed my hands, changed my shirt, and went inside to make coffee. Derek knocked at exactly 2 o'clock. He was wearing a button-down shirt with the collar open, dressed down deliberately, I noted in the calculated way of a man who wanted to appear less polished than usual. He was carrying a small bundle of flowers wrapped in paper from the grocery store. Emily stood half a step behind him. She was wearing a light jacket despite the June warmth, her arms crossed loosely at her waist, her eyes finding mine immediately, and holding them with an expression that was not Derek's expression, at all raw and direct, and genuinely ashamed. Dorothy let them in. I was standing in the kitchen doorway. "Dad." Derek extended the flowers toward me. "Thank you for seeing us." I took the flowers. I set them on the counter without finding a vase. "Sit down," I said. We arranged ourselves in the living room, Derek and Emily on the couch. Dorothy in the armchair near the window, me in the chair across from the coffee table. Derek sat forward with his elbows on his knees, which was a posture I recognized from watching him in business settings. Open body language practiced humility, the physical vocabulary of a man conducting a negotiation he intended to win. He began with Christmas Eve. He said he had been out of line. He said the things he had said were disrespectful, and that he had spent months thinking about how wrong he had been. He said it with the right pauses in the right places and the right amount of eye contact. And if I had not known Derek Walsh for 11 years, I might have believed that the remorse was the point of the visit rather than the setup. I let him finish. Emily spoke next. Hers was different. Her voice cracked on the second sentence, and she pressed her hand hard against her collarbone, the way she had done since childhood, when she was trying not to cry in front of people. She said she had failed me at that dinner, and that she had known it even while it was happening, and had done nothing anyway. She said she was sorry in a way that did not sound like a strategy. I believed Emily completely. I looked at Derek. "I appreciate you coming," I said. "Both of you." I set my coffee cup down on the table. "Emily, I hear you. I want you to know that." I looked at my daughter for a moment, at the woman she was, when she was not performing for her husband's benefit. We will be all right. You and I will always be all right. Emily's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together and nodded. I turned to Derek. Kjærken. I said, I'm going to say something honest, and I need you to hear it the same way. I kept my voice level and unhurried. You did not drive here today because you are sorry about Christmas Eve. You drove here because the financial picture has become uncomfortable, and you are hoping that a Sunday afternoon and a bouquet from the grocery store will reset the arrangement we had before December 24th. I paused. That arrangement is over. It was over the moment you told a restaurant full of people that I lowered the quality of any table I sat at. Derek's jaw tightened. His open forward posture did not change. He was too practiced for that. But something behind his eyes recalculated. That's not why I came, he said. I think it is, I said. And I think somewhere underneath all of this, you know it too. I leaned forward slightly. You are a capable man, Derek. You have a real career and a real income and a family that deserves your full effort rather than the portion of it left over after you have worked every other angle. I held his gaze. I genuinely hope you figure that out. But I am not going to be part of the calculation anymore. The living room was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, Dorothy's garden sat in the full June afternoon light, unhurried and indifferent to everything happening inside the house. Derek stood up. He straightened his shirt. He looked at me with an expression that had given up pretending to be something it was not, which I thought was the most honest he had been in 11 years. Fine, he said. We will figure it out ourselves. But I know you will, I said. You are more capable than you have ever allowed yourself to prove. Emily stood. She crossed the room and put her arms around me before I could stand, her face pressed against my shoulder, the way she had pressed it there at 8 years old and 18 and 28, every version of her occupying the same gesture. I held her for a moment. I love you, Dad, she said into my shoulder. I love you too, I said. Come see your mother's garden before you go. The herbs are extraordinary this year. Derek waited by the door while Emily walked with Dorothy through the garden. I watched them from the kitchen window, Dorothy pointing at things. Emily leaning in to look, both of them moving slowly through the green afternoon rose. Derek did not join them. He stood at the door with his grocery store flowers still on my counter and his hands in his pockets, looking at something I could not see. I poured him a cup of coffee and left it on the counter beside him without comment. He picked it up. He drank it. It was the quietest thing Derek Walsh had ever done in my presence, and it was, I thought, a beginning of something small and uncertain and not yet earned but present. The way a new circuit is present before it is tested. The potential was there. What happened next was up to him. The idea of selling the house had been in the back of my mind since April, and I want to be clear about that. It did not come from Derek's visit in June or from anything that happened at a restaurant on Christmas Eve. It came from walking through the rooms of a 4-bedroom house with 2 people living in it and noticing the way an electrician notices an oversized panel in a small building, that the capacity no longer matched the load. Dorothy and I had moved into this house 31 years ago when Emily was 7 and the neighborhood was newer and we needed the space. We had needed it. 4 bedrooms made sense when one was a child's room and one was a guest room that actually had guests, and one was my study and one was ours. 31 years later, Emily was 38 and the guest room had not seen a guest in 4 years, and I was spending more time in the garage than in the study. And Dorothy had mentioned twice quietly that she would not mind a smaller yard, now that her knees had started giving her opinions about kneeling. I brought it up on a Saturday morning in July at the kitchen table over coffee. I've been thinking about selling, I said. Dorothy looked up from her book. She held my gaze for a moment, reading what was behind it, the way she had always been able to read me. Then she looked around the kitchen, slowly at the window over the sink, the corner where Emily's height marks were penciled on the doorframe, the ceiling light I had rewired the summer of 1998. And she looked back at me. "Where would we go?" she asked. "There's a development going up on the north side," I said. "The one Carol's project is working on. Mixed-age housing, smaller units, private patios, garden space included. I walked through a model unit last week." I wrapped both hands around my cup. It felt right, Dorothy. It felt like the right size for the life we actually have now. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Will it have room for my herbs?" "Private patio," I said. "Full sun on the south side." She picked up her book again. "Call the realtor Monday," she said. "The house sold in 5 days." Our realtor, a straightforward woman named Linda Marsh, who had been selling homes in this county for 22 years, told us the market was moving fast, and that the price we set was fair, and that she had 3 interested buyers before the sign went up on a Tuesday. By Sunday, we had a contract. The buyers were a young couple, early 30s, with a daughter who was 4 years old, and a look about them of people at the beginning of something. I shook the husband's hand in the driveway on the day we signed, and thought about being 37 years old in this same driveway, with a 7-year-old Emily on my shoulders, and a life that stretched ahead in every direction without a visible end. Good luck, I thought. Take care of it. We spent August packing. Dorothy was systematic and unsentimental about it, in the way she was systematic and unsentimental about most practical things which I had always admired. She kept what mattered and released what didn't, and trusted herself to know the difference. I did the same. By the end of the month, the rooms were mostly boxes, and the house had begun to look like what it was becoming, someone else's. Emily came on a Saturday in September to help. She came alone, which I appreciated. She worked alongside Dorothy in the kitchen wrapping dishes, and I could hear them talking through the wall while I disassembled the bookshelf in the study. Dorothy's voice low and steady, Emily's lighter, sometimes laughing at something. I did not go in. Some things between mothers and daughters need to happen without the witness of fathers. At one point, Emily appeared in the study doorway with a cup of coffee for me. She leaned against the frame and looked at the empty shelves. "Derek thinks you're doing this because of him," she said. "Derek thinks most things are because of him," I said. Emily pressed her lips together, suppressing a smile she had not quite decided to allow. "Are you, though, even a little—" I set the cup down and looked at my daughter honestly. "No," I said. "Your mother wants a smaller yard. I want a garage. I don't have to heat in January. The house has done its job. It's time." Emily nodded. She looked at the empty shelves for a moment longer. "I used to do homework in here," she said. "You'd be at the desk and I'd be on the floor, and you'd help me with math without making me feel stupid about not understanding it." "You were never stupid," I said. "You just needed things explained differently." She looked at me with the clear eyes she had when she was not performing for anyone. "I know, Dad," she said quietly. "I know that now." Moving day came in early October, cool and bright, the kind of fall morning that felt purposeful. The movers were efficient and professional, and by noon the truck was loaded. Dorothy stood in the empty living room for a few minutes by herself. I gave her the time. When she came out, her eyes were dry and her chin was level, and she had her keys in her hand. We locked the front door for the last time. I dropped the key into the lockbox Linda Marsh had attached to the handle. We walked to the car together. Derek's truck was parked across the street. I had not called to tell him the moving date. He had found out through Emily, I assumed, or through Dorothy, or through the simple visibility of a moving truck on a residential street. He was standing beside his truck with his hands in his jacket pockets, watching. I opened Dorothy's car door for her. She got in. I walked around to the driver's side. Derek raised one hand from his pocket. Not a wave exactly. Something smaller and less certain than a wave. I looked at him across the roof of the car. He looked older than he had at Christmas. Tiredness had found a permanent address in the corners of his eyes, and he was wearing it the way men wear things that have stopped being temporary. I gave him a single nod. Not forgiveness, not an invitation. An acknowledgement that he was standing there, and that I had seen him. The condo had a small balcony on the south side that caught the morning sun from 7 until about 11, depending on the season. In October, when we moved in, the light lasted until 9:30 and smelled like fallen leaves and the particular cold clarity of early autumn. By December, it was shorter and lower and came in at an angle that hit the terracotta pots along the railing and made them glow like something warmer than clay. Dorothy had planted herbs in those pots within the first week. Rosemary, thyme, one ambitious basil that had since surrendered to the November cold, but that she had not moved inside. I noticed as though she was giving it one last chance to surprise her. The tomato plants from the summer had long been cleared away, but she was already planning next year's varieties, which I knew because she had circled things in a seed catalog that appeared on the kitchen table sometime in November, and had not moved since. I was sitting on the balcony with my coffee on the second Saturday of December when Ray Donahue came through the front door with a paper bag from the bakery 3 blocks over and the comfortable ease of a man who had been given a spare key and understood exactly how much that meant. He pulled the second chair close and sat down and opened the bag on the small table between us. Inside were 2 cinnamon rolls the size of a man's fist, still warm, wrapped in parchment. He handed one to me without asking. I took it without thanking him because we had been past the formality of thanking each other for small kindnesses for 20 years. We sat together in the December morning light and ate our cinnamon rolls and drank our coffee and looked out over the courtyard below where a maintenance man was stringing white lights along the bare branches of the ornamental pear trees that lined the path to the main entrance. He worked slowly and carefully, one section at a time, testing each strand before he moved to the next. I watched him and thought that there was a man who understood his job. "How's the consulting going?" Ray asked. "Wrapping up," I said. "Final report is due the 15th. Carol wants to present to the board before the holidays." I drank my coffee. It was good work. Complicated grid, a lot of legacy infrastructure that had been patched and repatched over 30 years without anyone sitting down and looking at the whole system at once. I shook my head slightly. You cannot patch your way to a solution indefinitely. At some point you have to go back to the panel and start from what's actually there. Ray nodded. He knew I was not only talking about the grid. "Derek and Emily," he asked. "Emily calls on Sundays," I said. "We talk for 20 minutes, half hour sometimes. She sounds steadier than she did in the spring." I turned my coffee cup in my hands. "Derek sent a text 2 weeks ago. Said he wanted to talk when I was ready. I haven't responded yet." "Are you going to—" I looked at the maintenance man below, who had reached the end of a section and was stepping back to look at his work before continuing. "Yes," I said. "When the time is right. I'm not in a hurry and I'm not holding a grudge. I just need to know that what he has to say is worth the conversation." I paused. "He'll get there or he won't. Either way, I'll be fine." Ray picked up the last piece of his cinnamon roll. "Frank Walsh moved back to Cincinnati," he said. "Maggie's heard from Paulette. Apparently the Scottsdale arrangement fell apart when Derek stopped sending the monthly payments." I absorbed this without particular emotion. "How's Frank managing?" "According to Paulette, not well," Ray said. "But that's Frank's work to do, not yours." "No," I agreed. It isn't. Inside the condo, I heard Dorothy moving through the kitchen, the sound of cabinet doors, and the kettle going on, the ordinary morning music of a household that had found its rhythm again. Smaller than before. Quieter. Exactly the right size. My phone buzzed on the table. I looked at the screen. Tyler was calling on video. I answered it. His face filled the screen, hair going every direction, gap in his front teeth, now partially filled by a new tooth that had come in at a slight angle and that his orthodontist had already noted. Behind him, I could see the kitchen of Emily and Derek's house, a half-decorated Christmas tree visible through the doorway. "Grandpa." He said it the way he always said it, with the total satisfaction of someone arriving exactly where they meant to be. "Hey, Bud," I said. "Merry almost Christmas." Merry almost Christmas. He held the phone too close to his face, the way children held phones, so I could see mostly his forehead and one eye. "Grandpa, we got a real tree this year. Daddy said we were doing it ourselves, and we went to the lot on Henderson, and I picked it, and it's really big. Mom says it's too big, but Daddy said it's fine." I looked at Ray. He was watching the screen with the expression of a man who found 9-year-olds reliably entertaining. "What kind is it?" I asked. "A Douglas fir," Tyler said with complete authority. "The man at the lot told me. They smell really good." "Do you and Grandma Dorothy have a tree?" "A small one," I said. "On the balcony table. Your grandmother put lights on it last week." "Can I see it?" I turned the phone and showed him the small potted tree Dorothy had found at the garden center in November, strung with white lights that she turned on every evening when the December dark came early. Tyler made a sound of genuine appreciation. "I like it," he said. "It's cozy." "That's exactly what it is," I said. He pulled the phone back close to his face. "Grandpa, are you and Grandma Dorothy coming for Christmas Eve?" I had not decided this yet. I looked at Ray, who made a face that communicated very clearly that this was not a decision he was going to help me make. I looked back at Tyler's one visible eye, which was watching me with the particular patience of a child who has asked an important question and is prepared to wait as long as necessary for an honest answer. "We'll see, Bud," I said. "Your grandmother and I are talking about it." "Daddy said he hopes you come," Tyler said. Then, with the conversational pivot of a 9-year-old who has delivered his message and moved on. "Grandpa, did you know a Douglas fir can live for 1,000 years if nobody cuts it down?" "I did not know that," I said. "The man at the lot told me that too." A pause. "I feel a little bad about cutting it down now." "You gave it a good purpose," I said. "It's going to make your family's Christmas. That's not a bad way to go." Tyler considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "Okay," he said, satisfied. "I have to go help Mom with the ornaments. Bye, Grandpa. Bye, Grandpa's friend." "That's Ray," I said. "Bye, Ray," Tyler said, and the screen went dark. Ray reached over and picked up his coffee cup. "He's something," he said. "Yes," I said. "He is." We sat for a while longer. The maintenance man below had finished the pear trees and was standing back looking at his work, 2 rows of bare branches threaded with white light running the length of the courtyard path. He plugged them in to test them. Every strand came on. He nodded once to himself and began coiling his extension cord. I looked at the small tree on the balcony table with Dorothy's white lights, and at the terracotta pots with their herbs, and at the courtyard below coming slowly to life in the December morning. And I thought about a restaurant on Christmas Eve a year ago, and a navy coat, and a man who had been told he lowered the quality of any table he sat at. I thought about 40 years of work inside other people's walls, about Tyler's hand in mine beside the tulip bed, about Dorothy's face in the June firefly dark, about Ray's laugh when I told him the number $85,000 full and unrestrained, the laugh of a man genuinely delighted for his friend. Dorothy appeared in the balcony doorway with her tea. She looked at the courtyard lights and made a small sound of approval. She pulled her cardigan tighter and leaned against the doorframe. "Maggie called," she said. "She wants to know if we're coming for dinner tonight." "Tell her yes," I said. Dorothy looked at me for a moment. The long, clear look of a woman who has known a man for 43 years and still finds things worth looking at. Then she went back inside to call Maggie and Ray, and I sat in the December light with our coffee, and below us the white lights came on along the courtyard path, one strand at a time, steady and unhurried, and exactly where they were supposed to be. I was 68 years old. I had a balcony in the morning sun, a wife who circled things in seed catalogs, a best friend who brought cinnamon rolls without being asked, and a grandson who felt bad about Christmas trees. I had held the line. I had done it quietly and without apology, and without losing myself in the process. That I had decided somewhere between December last year and December this year was what self-respect actually looked like. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, just true. Just the lights coming on every single time because someone who knew what they were doing had done the work right. Looking back, I was not a perfect father or a perfect husband. I stayed quiet too long. I wrote checks when I should have drawn boundaries. I confused generosity with self-erasure, and I let it go on for years before I finally understood the difference. If this family story sounds familiar, if you have ever sat at a table where your presence was tolerated but your dignity was not, I want you to know something. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to stop funding people who treat your love like a line item they can spend without gratitude. I believe God puts certain moments in front of us, not to break us, but to show us exactly how strong we already are. That December evening showed me mine. My personal opinion: dignity is not something anyone can give you. It is something you choose to protect every single day. These grandpa stories do not always end with perfect reconciliation. Sometimes they end with a smaller table, a quieter house, and a cup of coffee on your own porch, and that is enough. That is more than enough. This family story taught me that peace is not found by keeping everyone comfortable. It is found by finally being honest. If this grandpa story moved you in any way, I would love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so you never miss a story that matters. Thank you sincerely for staying with me until the very end. The stories ahead contain some fictional elements, created purely to carry a meaningful message. If that is not what you are looking for, no hard feelings, find the content that speaks to you best. But if you are staying, I am glad you are here.